The year was 1776, and the biting cold of December wrapped itself around the swollen Delaware River in the earliest hours of Christmas Day. Soldiers shivered in tattered uniforms, their morale wearing thin after months of losses and retreat. But amidst the chaos and despair, one figure stood resolute, his piercing gaze fixed on the horizon ahead. George Washington, the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. That night, as Washington led his troops across the rushing waters in a daring surprise attack against the Hessian forces in Trenton, the fate of a fledgling nation dangled precariously in his hands. This moment, though legendary, was just one chapter in a life shaped by perseverance, unshakable integrity, and an unparalleled commitment to the cause of liberty. George Washington was born into humble beginnings on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He was the first child of Augustine Washington and his second wife, Mary Ball Washington. Life on the family plantation was rooted in hard work and discipline, as George grew up on the rolling Tidewater lands. But he wasn't destined for wealth or aristocracy. His family wasn't part of Virginia's elite. When George was just 11 years old, his father passed away, leaving the family to navigate financial instability. Washington's education was modest. He never attended college, but early on, he demonstrated an aptitude for surveying and mathematics. At the age of 16, he began working as a land surveyor. This job allowed him to explore the frontier, a dynamic setting that would influence his future view of a nation stretching from the Atlantic to uncharted lands. At 20, Washington's life took an unexpected turn. He joined the Virginia militia and within years fought alongside British forces during the French and Indian War. It was here that he learned both the brutality of combat and the complexities of leadership. His courage under fire during the disastrous Battle of Fort Necessity earned him recognition, but the experience also revealed uneasy truths about colonial dependence on Britain's military power. Washington's career in the militia provided valuable lessons that would serve him decades later, where his leadership didn't merely impact combat, but reshaped a nation. Following the war, Washington returned to civilian life, focusing on his beloved plantation, Mount Vernon. But even as he dedicated himself to agriculture and married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow with 2 children, global tensions simmered around him. By 1765, the Stamp Act inflamed colonial opposition to British tyranny, and Washington found himself swept up in the growing tide of resistance. He didn't yet speak out boldly against British rule, but as taxes mounted and Parliament exerted control without representation, Washington's quiet patriotism began to transform into something far more striking. By 1775, revolution was inevitable, and when delegates at the Second Continental Congress appointed Washington commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, his life took on a dramatic new purpose. Washington's readiness to lead marked the beginning of a new chapter, driven by the values of liberty and the vision of a free nation. Leading the Continental Army was no easy task. Washington inherited an army as inexperienced and ill-equipped as the nation it represented. Yet he believed deeply in the ideals of the Revolution, the vision of self-governance, freedom from oppression, and equality before the law. His determination was unwavering, even as the odds felt insurmountable. In the early years of the war, Washington tasted failure. His forces suffered defeats in New York and faced bitter cold and starvation during the winter encampment in Valley Forge. Still, Washington was more than just a strategist. He was a symbol. He inspired his soldiers to stay the course, to fight on despite impossible odds. His leadership wasn't born from polished speeches, but from his quiet strength and unrelenting perseverance. Then came turning points. December 25, 1776 saw Washington lead his men across the Delaware River for a surprise victory at Trenton. Later victories at Saratoga, and eventually Yorktown cemented his reputation. By 1781, with the surrender of British General Cornwallis, the American experiment had triumphed. The Revolution was over. Many expected Washington to assume supreme power in the wake of independence, the role of a king even. But Washington shocked the world by surrendering his military commission and retiring to Mount Vernon. This act, perhaps more than any victory on the battlefield, demonstrated his character. Washington believed deeply in the principle of civilian leadership, and he set an indelible precedent by stepping away from power. The peace was short-lived, however. America, still fragile and disorganized, faced mounting chaos under the Articles of Confederation. Recognizing the need for a stronger federal government, Washington reluctantly returned to public life. In 1787, he presided over the Constitutional Convention, lending his stature to the creation of a blueprint for a democratic republic. When the new Constitution was ratified, the nation's gaze fell back on Washington. No other figure commanded such universal respect. And so in 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected as the first president of the United States. His presidency wasn't about ambition, it was about duty. As president, Washington navigated uncharted waters. Every decision he made set a precedent, from his management of foreign relations to his creation of a cabinet. He handled conflicts like the Whiskey Rebellion cautiously but firmly and avoided becoming entangled in Europe's wars, leaving behind a legacy of neutrality. In his farewell address, Washington extolled the values of unity and warned against the dangers of political factions, a timeless piece of wisdom still relevant today. After 8 years, Washington stepped down, refusing to serve any longer despite public calls for him to stay. In doing so, he solidified the principle that leadership in a republic should remain temporary, not hereditary or absolute. George Washington spent his final years at Mount Vernon, tending to his plantation and enjoying the slower pace of rural life. On December 14, 1799, Washington passed away at the age of 67. The entire nation mourned its first leader, its anchor during storms of revolution. Washington's legacy endures not because he was flawless, but because he was steadfast. He was a man of principle, someone who valued the greater good above personal ambition. His leadership united 13 fractious colonies into a nation, and his humility ensured that the values of liberty and governance would remain at the heart of American democracy. Today, his name is etched into the foundation of the United States, from the capital city that bears his name to the ideals that guided his every decision. George Washington wasn't just the first president. He was the embodiment of what a leader should strive to be: courageous, moral, and unwavering in the face of adversity. So the next time you pull a dollar bill from your pocket, remember the man whose face graces it. Not a king, not a conqueror, but a citizen who believed in the power of a people to govern themselves. George Washington, the father of a nation,